Welcome to Spotlight on Women, a podcast produced by NRP's Women's Inclusion Network. I'm Tiffany Montgomery, an asset manager at the NRP Group and proud member of the Women's Inclusion Network. WIN's mission is to hire, develop, and promote women at NRP. We take pride in celebrating, recognizing, and advancing the women who elevate our business and our communities. Join us as we shine a light on some of NRP's exceptional female leaders. We hope their stories motivate and inspire you. Today, we welcome Cheryl Steigerwald, Vice President of Vertical Design at the NRP Group, for an enlightening conversation on how hard work, diligence, and supreme organizational skills have led to her success. But first, let's hear from Carl Alt, Senior Horizontal Design Manager, on what makes Cheryl such a valued member of our team.
Hello, my name is Carl Alt, and I serve as the Senior Design Manager at the NRP Group. I had the pleasure of nominating Cheryl Steigerwald for WIN's Spotlight on Women series, and I'm here today to help shine a light on her many accomplishments. I work with Cheryl on a daily basis, facilitating the design and entitlements of the many projects and product types here at NRP. In my interactions with Cheryl, I have found that she embodies many of NRP's core values. If there is one core value that Cheryl exhibits better than all the rest, it would be high performance. Cheryl is the embodiment of a high performer, as many can attest to receiving many emails from her before 5 a.m. But what makes her a great leader is that she not only expects a high level of performance from others, she expects it from herself. She leads by example. Her work ethic is second to none. When I first joined NRP, we were very much in growth mode, adding a new employee on a weekly basis. There was not much in the way of formal processes and procedures. There was no one better suited that knew the ins and outs of NRP to codify and implement the systems we use today. We have Cheryl to thank for the many acronyms we use today: SOP, CPA, and MPI. These processes and procedures make for a more streamlined, efficient, and ultimately more profitable project. She has many contributions that led to the success of NRP, but I feel the creation of the MPI has been her greatest contribution. The MPI has created an effective system for design and entitlement, development, and NRP contractors to communicate on individual projects. It has taken information and documents that used to be stored in several different locations in many different forms and created a one-stop shop that all can access. It is for these reasons and many more that I celebrate and recognize Cheryl Steigerwald's significant contributions to our organization.
Thank you, Carl, for providing that great introduction and insight into what makes Cheryl such a valued member of our team. Welcome and congratulations, Cheryl, on this nomination. It's such an honor to be recognized by your peers for the many contributions that you make to our organization. We're really excited to have the opportunity to speak with you. Could you begin by telling us about your role within NRP and how long you have been with the organization?
Sure. Thanks for having me, Tiffany, and for Carl for the nomination. I am the Vice President of Vertical Design here at NRP. I have been with the company for 11 years now, so I've seen a lot of change in the organization as we've grown substantially since I started in 2009. And I work both in the development part of our company as well as the construction side.
Great. Can you share with us a little bit about the skills and characteristics that you think have helped you to become a successful leader in your current role and really in all of the roles that you've had with NRP?
Sure. So I try to tell my daughter this all the time, that I think ultimately it just comes down to hard work and really being diligent about everything you're doing. Take your task seriously, and I've just worked incredibly hard through my career. There's been difficult times, and you just kind of grin and bear it and just work through it. But I'd say my number one skill that's really allowed me to grow and flourish at NRP is my organizational skills. In my mind, if you can stay organized, you can always be successful. But if you're running from a place of trying to catch up all the time, you can never sort of advance in a company or your career because you're just struggling with the day-to-day. So I would say for everybody, and I tell my staff this all the time, like, get organized, don't try to catch up. I think that's just an invaluable skill to have.
And I think many people do know you for that. Do you have any insight or tips or tricks that you would recommend that have been helpful or beneficial to you to stay organized on a daily basis?
Sure. I think with email in particular, it is very hard to not get sucked into dealing with whatever is the top of your email box, but that is not necessarily the biggest priority. So I have set up a time. I start my day very early where I can literally get 2, 3, 4 hours of work done before the mandatory calls and interruptions every 5 minutes happen. So that has been a big help for me. I also schedule out. I might get an email in and say, oh, this needs to be done. Instead of worrying about it right now, I put a block of time on my calendar for later that week to tackle that. I also have a pretty sophisticated way I organize all my emails to stay on top of that and leverage other software and reminders. So I don't have to keep everything in my head. I keep it out there in something that's going to remind me automatically so I don't have to worry about missing deadlines or a task that in particular was assigned to someone else. So I know when that was supposed to be done. If it didn't get accomplished, I can then ask for that.
Those are really great ideas and things that I think that we could all really benefit from, especially, given our current circumstances. I think many of us are spending a great deal more time in video conferences, and that's kind of eating away at our normal daily timeframes where we would actually be accomplishing work. So I think that's great. So kind of speaking to the current situation and the climate of the pandemic, many people have experienced job loss and are really looking to rebuild their careers while trying to maintain some type of hope for what is a brighter future.
Mm-hmm.
I know that you experienced something similar in 2008 during the recession. Are you able to speak to how you navigated that difficult time and what you learned about yourself that might help others?
Sure. So prior to being laid off in 2008, I worked at a retail architecture firm, and we all know during that recession, that was an industry hit very hard. But I was also a person who thought, oh, I would never be the person that got laid off, that I was a hard worker, I was what we would consider an A-plus player, but no one's immune to that, is what I learned. And you may be just in the wrong spot at the wrong time, where the project you were working on happened to be the one that was just finished, so you were the most disposable at that point in time. And I think you just have to take those opportunities and sort of reevaluate your career and what you want to do, explore other options. Like, ultimately, I decided I did not want to work for an architecture firm anymore, that my strengths and skills really were more suited to the development side of our industry. And to say that I went out and found a development job in 2009 is kind of crazy because everybody was getting laid off, but NRP had such a strong, affordable housing background that work just continued. And I was able to get a job using contacts I had from my past life as an architect. And yeah, I took a kind of big salary hit. And it was a hard year when I first joined NRP. But ultimately, I'm in such a better place and so much happier now. So just be open to new experiences, talk to people. I was really embarrassed at first, but then I started talking to people and everybody was like, oh my gosh, you're the last person I would have thought that got laid off. And that just made me feel good and gave me confidence that, yes, I can find a new position and things are going to be okay. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think you bring up a lot of good points. I think most of us kind of have a career path in mind and, what is it in 1 year, 3 years, 5 years? But I think a situation like that really causes you to take pause and evaluate what you're working on and maybe where you think you could be. So
Right.
a little bit of a blessing in disguise there. And also, just to your point, the networking component. I mean, we should all be considering that and thinking about our networks and building those, not just in times of hardship, but also when you're celebrating things or doing well within your career, kind of thinking about how do you give back to others who might be having a hard time or struggling with what they're currently facing.
One of the things I was able to do during that time was have a lot of informational interviews. They weren't necessarily with people that were looking to hire anybody, but they were contacts, and they would send me to other people, and then I'd go talk to them, and they would send me to other people, and eventually, was able to land something and also build relationships. And that was really hard for me. I'm a total introvert. I wanted nothing to do with that process, but it's good to have gone through. I would also recommend everybody keep your LinkedIn profile updated at all times. Like, don't wait till you get laid off and realize, oh, my profile's 10 years old. Like, then it's just much more painful. This goes back to my organizational, like I have a reminder yearly in my calendar to go and update that kind of thing, as well as kind of download my contacts on a regular basis. So you have that access. Those are your people you've made relationships with, and you need to try to leverage that throughout your career.
Absolutely. And I think the statistic is something like 80% of your future jobs come from the network in which you have. So it's always important to be working with those folks and leveraging those relationships.
Yeah, I think I have applied online for about 40 different positions, and almost none of those, like cold, just send out your resume through Indeed or whatever, got any return calls back. All the return calls and interviews I had were from contacts and people making an introduction. So,
and I think just remembering how many people have been a part of our journeys professionally, and just thanking those people, because we have all taken certain steps in our lives that are a direct result of someone's help. So just, reaching out and showing recognition and appreciation for those folks is really important.
Yeah, making time for people when they need, ask for that kind of thing. Like, even if it's a half an hour, or someone's high school senior that wants to understand a career path, or soon to be college graduate, like making time for them, and their parents or they may help you in the future. So
Absolutely. So switching gears just a little bit, we spent some time talking about your strengths as it relates to organization, and I think that kind of speaks to this next question. So during your time at NRP, you spent a great deal of it really creating and implementing a number of platforms that were designed to build efficiencies for both our department and construction teams. How have leveraging these systems positively impacted our business and really helped to ensure our success over time?
So when I started here, the position I have right now didn't even exist. We didn't even really have a design development department at all. It was managed very differently. So as the company grew and I grew, I saw there was these need for developing a way for consistency across the entire company. And as I think we all know, there are many different development and construction offices, and how do you get those staff that never see each other in the lunchroom to be doing the same things at the same time in the same way? So I just started developing tools for myself, and then as new staff came on, started sort of ad hoc rolling those out. I wasn't necessarily in a position to be training these people at that time, or tasked to take on any of these, but these are things I just felt like needed to be developed. I'd say there's maybe 4 big things that I felt like were important. Is how do we consistently give NRP construction the same data and design assumptions for a job in a packaged way that they can price? And that was very important. Like, once we get our committee approvals, to know exactly what was in that approval, and that construction had all of that in their number. So I developed our master project information, and I would like to give a shout out to Rachel's team and John Curtis and Chris Markovitz, who really took what was my dream and made it real through programming. And it's an amazing resource we have at NRP to build our own software. Sort of the same thing with the vertical design standard operating procedure is the vertical design managers were starting. They didn't really know what they were supposed to do, when they were supposed to do it, and how they were supposed to do it. So I really developed a comprehensive tool to make them understand the full scope of their job, which is very broad reaching in many directions. And while they're all architects for the most part, there's a lot of owner related tasks and they've maybe never done. So documenting those so they understand exactly how and when they're supposed to do each of those items, to, again, for consistency, which helps keep our product the same, our costs the same. And then there's just a lot of people that need to find data, find drawings, find documents, and providing ways through third-party software where we can get to that stuff easily, no matter who you are in the company. That when I first started, it was very much one person was managing a job and they had everything maybe on their company drive, but maybe it's on their laptop, who knows. I always remember one of my first days at NRP, I had a proposal for a design consultant that was executed, and I asked where this was supposed to go, and everybody looked at me like I had three heads, because there wasn't anywhere it's supposed to go. But I came from a firm where it went to accounting and it was filed somewhere and you could look it up later, and that just didn't even exist. So now we have a lot better systems of working collaboratively, and if you leave and get hit by a bus, it's terrible, but everybody's still going to be able to go on, which is important when there are layoffs and things happen. And then also my tips of the day, I send them out sometimes a few a week, sometimes once a month, but to kind of give my team a baseline of, here's a lesson that somebody learned and it cost them money. Here, look, the other 6 of you this didn't happen to, learn from this tip rather than doing the same mistake yourself. So.
No, absolutely. And I know that you have contributed in a big way on that front, and many, many folks have learned a ton from those tips of the day, but also just from the structure that you've built out. I think, to your point, these teams are massive. There are many, many folks who are a part of the front end development process, and then the handoff to construction and construction to property management. And then, the group that I'm on in asset management also ends up touching the assets. So just really understanding what was that course and that kind of process from which it was developed, and where are we at now with it as a stabilized asset, and how do we work together to share that information. So I know that has been a significant benefit to all of us as you've worked through that process. So thank you for that.
I'd say one thing, when you're talking about asset management, is we used to get to the disposition of a property and there would be a big time suck on the development team or the design team, because their asset management's calling and asking, where's this document? Where's this document? What happened to this? And if we file all that correctly, we won't have those interruptions when it's really fuzzy 5 years later what you actually did. So that's part of the organization. Take enough extra minutes now so they don't create half an hours of minutes having to be dedicated later.
Absolutely. And that has definitely streamlined the process on our side as it relates to those dispositions. I know that our pipeline is abundant as we move forward. So anything that we can do to help each other is always great.
Yeah, absolutely.
So tell us a little bit about some of the best career advice that you've ever received.
So as an architect, I have to do my continuing education credits every year. So a lot of times I'll go to these, seminars held in tiny, freezing hotel conference rooms. And I think the best advice actually came from one of those. And it was, take one piece of advice from this whole day's discussion today that's applicable to you at this point in time and go back and figure out how to implement it into your work style, and make it a habit over the next, say, 3 months. And I really took that to heart, because you go to those and they may give you 15 good ideas. And if you try to do all of them, you will just fail. Like, it's impossible to change your work style that much. But usually there's one thing that you really need at that point in time, and it changes throughout your career. When you're new employee just out of school, you need certain things. And if you're taking on a leadership role, you need other things. So really kind of catching those pieces of advice over time and taking them back to the office and being thoughtful about how you try to implement them to improve how you do your job. Again, usually when I do find those little nuggets, I'll bring it back, and it will be an Outlook reminder on my calendar every morning at 7:30, like, this is what you need to do today. Or maybe it's something that happens every Monday morning of develop a plan for this week around this task or something. And that has really allowed me to work on a lot of my weaknesses and kind of improve and grow and develop skills that I maybe didn't have, that I didn't need in my past life. But as I got a new position, I really needed to learn better. I think that was really the best thing that anybody ever told me.
No, and I think that's great. I think we live in a world of information. There's so much coming at us all at one time. And I think sometimes it's easy to get overwhelmed, and that causes folks to just stand still. But I think that idea is really great. Take something that's small and tangible and, make it some type of habit over the 30 days, as they say, and see how all of that starts to build up and really change you and make you better at your role over time. Mm-hmm. So that's great.
And those could be from a seminar. It could be from a discussion with a mentor. It could be from a podcast you listen to or a book that you read. I mean, those things are everywhere, and sometimes you have to seek them out. Sometimes they fall in your lap. But just kind of taking advantage of those and not being passive in your career, or just kind of letting things happen to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was just going to ask a little bit about, you mentioned what the greatest career advice was that was given to you, but kind of turning the table, mm-hmm. What is your greatest insight, or what would you share with others now that you've come to this point in your career that you think would be helpful to them to take away?
Sure. So I think I tell most of my staff this, and I tell a lot of people I'm interviewing this for new positions when they're asking, where is my growth path at the company? And I always tell them, it's your job to make your own destiny. There really isn't necessarily even maybe a position on the current org chart of the company that you could grow into. It might not exist, but I'm sort of proof that that doesn't really matter. I mean, all the positions I've had at NRPs, that's the first one that I was hired into, didn't exist when I started. And the company grew, and then a whole new branch sort of started, and I kind of moved into that, and then, created new positions as the company grew, and we hired more people, and I got the senior role of that position. So don't be discouraged by the current growth chart or org chart, especially at a company like NRP, who's very focused on growth. And maybe if you're at a smaller company, maybe you will have to move to experience that growth, but don't be discouraged by it. Also, every company has holes of things that aren't getting done, and you notice those, and you say, man, it would be great if we had this or we had that. And don't wait for someone to ask you, hey, why don't you go do that? Like, just start doing it. And often you will be rewarded for that, and maybe even promoted or a new position created based around that sort of hole that you saw. And NRP is definitely that kind of company where they value and offer opportunities to those types of people who really just take it upon themselves to get stuff done that needs to get done more in a new or better way.
Absolutely. And I think there's such a diverse group of folks that make up the employee base, and each of us
Yeah.
sees something different or has a different set of strengths that we really bring to the table. So something that you see, I might not, and vice versa. And I think there's beauty and value in that for us to come together as a group and put the pieces of the puzzle together to ensure our ultimate success. So I definitely agree, just, kind of being the catalyst to that and jumping in and creating structure or processes or solving problems. I think that always is a good thing, no matter what happens. Even if it's not a promotion, it might just create an efficiency. And so being able to do that and help be a part of the greater team and the work that's being done is always the approach to take, for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, I just want to thank you, Cheryl, for everything that you have brought to NRP over the years, and everything that I know that you will contribute to the future of our company, and for spending a little bit of time with us today, just sharing some of the lessons that you've learned along the way. We're hoping that this series offers some insights into the great women leaders that we have across the organization, and hopefully create some nuggets of wisdom that people can pick up and put into their daily routines or to what they offer to others. So thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to launching this series and really highlighting the good work that's being done by folks across the organization.
Yeah, thanks. No problem. And you're doing a wonderful job with the WIN organization. I think it's important to show women, especially in the development world, which isn't necessarily the most women-friendly space, especially when you're in the construction environment, that it's okay. There's lots of diversity, and we all bring really good strengths to the company. So I appreciate what you were doing as well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us for WIN Spotlight on Women podcast. For more information on the NRP Group or the Women's Inclusion Network, visit our website at www.nrpgroup.com. We invite you to return next week for a brand new Spotlight episode.